Okay, who wants to try 3 plus 3?
3 plus 3? Really? What kind of school is this anyway?
Stand on up. Stand up, babe. Well, what is 57 plus 135?
192.
Yeah. Can you tell me what 57 multiplied by 135 is?
1,695. The square root is 87.7. And change.
At the beginning of the movie, Frank Adler is preparing his niece, Mary, for school. He tells her he has made a special breakfast, but Mary is reluctant to go and makes excuses. She even expresses worry about her one-eyed cat, Fred. Frank reassures her that Fred will be fine and insists she get ready. When Mary asks about the special breakfast, Frank reveals it is simply a box of cereal with the word special written on it, much to her disappointment. After seeing her onto the bus, Frank watches Mary head to school for the first time. His neighbor, Roberta, follows him back to the house, expressing concern about Mary going to school. She worries something might happen to the girl, and even Frank appears anxious about it. Meanwhile, at school, Mary looks unhappy and out of place. Her teacher, Miss Bonnie, walks around the class asking students simple math questions. Mary feels the questions are beneath her and looks at Bonnie and the other students with clear disappointment. She calls Bonnie's attention to this, so the teacher decides to ask her a specific question. Bonnie starts asking Mary more difficult questions, and she answers them with ease. However, as the questions become even more challenging, especially with multiplication, Mary briefly hesitates. Bonnie takes this as a sign to stop and moves on with the class. But after a few moments of silence, Mary answers the multiplication problem correctly. Bonnie checks the answer with a calculator and is shocked that it is correct. She realizes that Mary isn't just an ordinary child. Later that day, the school principal, Miss Davis, is introduced to the class. All the children treat her with respect, except for Mary. Acting casually, Mary loudly asks the principal to call Frank to come take her out of school immediately. When Frank arrives to pick Mary up, Bonnie takes the opportunity to speak with him. She tries to convince Frank that Mary is not a typical child. Frank brushes off her concerns, explaining that Mary simply used the Trachtenberg method for the math problems, something he learned at a young age. Still intrigued, Bonnie looks up the method later and is impressed. Meanwhile, Frank is working on a boat, and Mary asks if they can take it for a test drive. They spend time at the beach, chatting about various things. Frank tells Mary that her mother would have wanted her to make friends. So, for show and tell, Mary brings Fred to school to show him off to her classmates. She explains that Fred has only one eye. When the other children ask how he lost it, Mary says she doesn't know, as she found him in the trash and rescued him. Meanwhile, Bonnie continues to bond with Mary. She gives her extra classwork to challenge her, knowing she can finish it quickly. Mary seems to enjoy the challenge, and the two share a warm, affectionate smile. As Bonnie grows closer to Mary, she starts looking into the Adler family. She tries to find information about Frank, but comes up empty. Instead, she discovers details about Frank's late sister, Diane, a brilliant child prodigy in mathematics. An MIT professor is quoted saying that Diane had an exceptional mind that could have changed the world. However, Bonnie's research also reveals that Diane tragically ended her life at the age of 27, leaving her daughter, Mary, in Frank's care. With these findings, Bonnie decides to meet Frank at a local bar. There, Frank opens up about his sister. He recalls that Diane showed up at his house one evening with baby Mary, asking to talk. Frank was in a hurry to go on a date and told Diane he'd listen to her when he returned that night. When Frank got home, he found Mary sleeping on the couch and Diane dead on the bathroom floor. Frank admits that although it wasn't his fault, he feels responsible and regrets not being there for his sister. Bonnie asks if there are any other family members. Frank explains that Mary's biological father abandoned Diane early in their relationship, and his own mother is a strict, no-nonsense British woman. Some days later, as Mary heads to school on the bus, she notices one of her classmates struggling to carry a project. At first, Mary worries that her own project isn't good enough. Then, she sees a classmate being bullied by a 12-year-old who trips the boy and breaks his project. The other children join in the teasing, but Mary steps in to defend him. She tells the bullies to stop. When they don't, she hits the main bully in the face with a book. Frank is called to the school. He sees the bully, whose nose is still bleeding, but immediately checks on Mary to make sure she is all right. Then, he heads to the principal's office. Inside, the principal insists that violence is unacceptable. Frank assures her that Mary will understand this, but he also expresses pride in his niece for standing up to a bully. Principal Davis suggests that Mary's exceptional talents merit a place at the prestigious Oaks Academy for Gifted Education, where she could thrive. However, financial concerns lead Frank to hesitate. Davis reveals that Mary would receive a full scholarship. Despite this, Frank refuses the offer, insisting that Mary should have a normal upbringing in a regular school. This decision leaves Frank uncertain if he is doing the right thing. He shares his doubts with Bonnie when she gently questions him after the meeting. Meanwhile, Mary takes responsibility for her actions. She apologizes to the class and asks them to recognize the work her classmate Justin put into his art project. Later that day, Frank and Mary are surprised to find his mother, Evelyn, waiting for them at home. Evelyn presents Mary with an expensive laptop and a book on advanced algebra. Mary shows little excitement for the book, remarking that she has already moved on to differential equations. Frank ensures Mary thanks her grandmother. Evelyn is unimpressed with their modest living conditions. This fuels tension, and Evelyn voices her disapproval, stating Mary needs a more suitable environment. She even threatens to involve the authorities. Over lunch the next day, she warns Frank that legal action for custody may be imminent. Evelyn believes Diane would agree with her, but Frank strongly disagrees. Evelyn accuses Frank of being unfit and declares her intention to take the matter to court. As time passes, Frank tries to connect more deeply with Mary. During one of their hangouts, she asks him about God and faith. Frank admits he holds personal beliefs, but avoids shaping hers, emphasizing the importance of forming her own opinions. They also talk about their neighbor, Roberta. When the court session finally begins, Evelyn's intentions are clear. She plans to gain custody of Mary and move her to Massachusetts for what she deems a better life. Seeing how the case is playing out, Roberta volunteers to testify to help Frank. However, she is ineligible to testify because she is not family. Determined to keep Mary, Frank asks Roberta to babysit one night. She agrees, and Mary spends a joyful evening with her, singing and dancing. Meanwhile, Frank and Bonnie go out and bond over drinks. Their relationship grows stronger, and they have an intimate encounter that evening at Frank's place. The following morning, while trying to retrieve a CD, Mary catches Bonnie sneaking out of Frank's room. This embarrasses both Bonnie and Frank. He reacts angrily, feeling his personal life is constantly intruded upon by Mary. Upset by the outburst, Mary runs off to hide in her room. However, the two later reconcile after Frank offers a heartfelt apology. In the meantime, Evelyn secures a brief visit with Mary in Boston. There, Mary sees family photos that offer glimpses into her mother and grandmother's past. Evelyn takes her to Miami and tells her stories about the 7 Millennium Problems and Grigori Perelman's work on the Poincaré conjecture. Evelyn laments Diane's unfinished efforts to solve the Navier-Stokes equation, envisioning the accolades Diane might have achieved. Inspired, Mary shares her dream of one day being honored for her own intellectual contributions. During this visit, Evelyn introduces Mary to Professor Shankland, who challenges her with an intricate math problem. Initially, Mary appears confused, leading Shankland to doubt her potential. However, as she returns home with her angry grandmother, Mary points out an error in the equation itself. When they return, she makes the necessary corrections and solves the problem. Shankland is astonished. When he asks why she didn't correct it immediately, Mary tells him her uncle warns her never to correct adults. Returning home, Mary tells Frank that while Evelyn is kind in her own way, she doesn't want to live with her. Frank reassures Mary that she will stay with him. Eventually, a social worker named Pat visits to evaluate Mary's well-being. During their conversation, Mary speaks warmly of Frank, recounting their bond over activities like watching Ultimate Fighting and reaffirming his promise to keep her close. Despite the challenges, Mary trusts Frank and believes in his commitment to her. When Pat asks why she believes Frank wants to care for her, she responds confidently, saying he has loved her from the very beginning, regardless of her intelligence. Back in the courtroom, the drama intensifies when Mary's biological father appears, siding with Evelyn. However, Frank's attorney humiliates him by highlighting his ignorance. He doesn't even know Mary's middle name and has never met her. This lack of involvement helps Frank win the day in court. Later, Evelyn tells Frank she dislikes the rift between them, but Frank reminds her they have always been at odds. At home, Mary locks herself in her room, crying uncontrollably over the absence of her father, who made no attempt to visit her. To lift her spirits, Frank takes Mary and Roberta to a hospital to witness the birth of a baby boy. As they wait, Frank recounts Mary's own birth story, describing the joy and excitement surrounding her arrival. Mary celebrates alongside the families in the maternity ward, and her mood lifts significantly. When the trial resumes, Evelyn takes the stand. During her testimony, she claims Diane never played sports. This prompts Frank's attorney to confront her with a photo of Diane playing baseball. Evelyn's strict focus on Diane's academic pursuits, to the exclusion of a normal life or extracurricular activities, becomes a heated point of contention. The lawyer further brings up Diane's youthful rebellion when she ran off with Paul, her first love, to ski in Vermont. Evelyn's harsh reaction, which included legal action, devastated Diane and contributed to her attempted suicide in 1999. Evelyn defends her actions, insisting she tried to be a good mother. When Frank takes the stand, he admits to working as a freelance boat repairman. Evelyn's attorney casts doubt on his ability to provide for Mary, citing concerns over her education, healthcare, and the incident where she confronted the school bully. The attorney also brings up Frank's past, noting a bar fight where he spent a night in jail. Frank explains the fight was self-defense, but acknowledges the difficulties he has faced. As the trial concludes, Frank's attorney suggests an alternative, sending Mary to live temporarily with a foster family. This arrangement would allow her to decide her living situation when she turns 12. Although conflicted, Frank ultimately agrees. He is totally heartbroken when he drops her off at the foster home. Mary pleads tearfully for him not to leave, reminding him of his promise to never abandon her. In the meantime, Frank and Roberta suffer through the pain of Mary's absence. As time passes, Frank confides in Bonnie. He admits he had considered calling child services before, but couldn't bring himself to let Mary go. Now, he blames himself for the situation. One day, he tries to visit Mary, but the foster family tells him she doesn't want to see him. Disappointed, he returns home. Several days later, Bonnie spots a poster for pets up for adoption and sees Fred. She informs Frank, who quickly rushes to the shelter. He rescues Fred, along with 2 other cats. At the shelter, the employee reveals that Evelyn was behind Fred's abandonment. Furious, Frank and Roberta head to the foster home to retrieve Mary. Frank retrieves some files before they leave. When they arrive, they find Evelyn there. Frank presents her with a bombshell. The files contain documents proving that Diane had solved the Navier-Stokes equation. Frank reveals that Diane wanted the work published only after Evelyn's death. This confirms the negative impact Evelyn had on Diane's life. Overcome with emotion and the realization of her daughter's wishes, Evelyn finally gives up. She allows Mary to return to Frank. Mary and Frank joyfully reconcile. As they drive away, Roberta is relieved to be reunited with them. Later, Evelyn scans through Diane's tear-stained notes and doodles, eventually breaking down in tears herself. She contacts MIT, reaching out to Professor Shanklin to organize the publication of the proof. Towards the end of the movie, Mary begins attending university courses, achieving the milestones she dreamed of, but she still finds joy in her childhood activities. After class, Frank picks her up, handing her a copy of René Descartes' writings on existence. Mary playfully teases him about the philosophical gift, and their bond remains strong. He drops her off at a park where she joins a group of Girl Scouts. Watching her from afar, Frank smiles warmly at Bonnie, who is also at the playground.